Hi, this is Ann Hackman Green Talk, and today we're with John Vieira, and he's Ford's Director of Global Sustainability. We're going to talk a little bit about today what it's like to be the Sustainability Director at a Fortune 500 company. So, John, tell me some of the things when you started out you had to face to be able to get your job done.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Anna, because the real focus from a sustainability standpoint, there are really three pieces, right? It's developing the environmental strategies for the company, developing the social strategies for the company, but it needs to be grounded in economic goodness. So one of the big challenges was when we look at the environmental element, for instance, how do you create environmental strategies that make business sense? And one of the big challenges that we had within the company is that a lot of people view sustainability and environmental goodness as like a philanthropic or charitable type of an organization and a practice. And what we needed to convince people was you can develop strategies that, for instance, are environmentally friendly, and you could do it in a way that actually makes business sense.
And when you came, did you come up through the company, or did you come from outside the company?
Yeah, great question. So actually my background, I've been at the company now for 29 years. I've been in my current position for 5 years. So for the previous 24 years, I was actually in the operations of the company. Particularly, I was in the product development organization. So I was a product development engineer. And it was really knowing the operations that I think really has made us, fairly successful in terms of developing strategies that we could then get adopted by the core organizations.
So if you were to talk to another Fortune 500 company or even a really nice-sized company, and they were thinking going the sustainability route, would you recommend actually hiring within and promoting up?
Yeah, I would definitely hire within. So I think the real key is, from a sustainability standpoint, the goal is always to drive sustainability into all the operations of your company. Now, in order to drive it within all the operations, you really need to be convincing in each operation that the sustainability strategy that you're proposing is going to make sense to that operation. The way you could ensure that it makes sense is to draw people in from that operation that knows that operation and can help translate the sustainability strategy into that operation.
So as a sustainability director, you probably cover all the spectrums of a business.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So when you think about, I'll take, for an example, Ford Motor Company as an automotive business. We have to draw in product development. We have to draw in manufacturing. We have to draw in our supply base or purchasing. We have to draw in human resources. So every single element of the company needs to be drawn in, and there's a sustainability aspect that's associated with that element of the company.
How did you decide to go from what you did in the company to end up being a sustainability director?
Yeah, that's a great question, because just a little side story. So my previous job, I was a chief engineer of a vehicle line. So a vehicle line would be like a car vehicle line or a truck vehicle line, and I had profit and loss responsibility. And when I got done with that job, I thought I was just going to be a chief engineer of another vehicle line. My boss at the time said, hey, we need a new global director for sustainability. In the past, those directors used to come from public affairs, and their whole job was to understand what the company was doing in the environmental space and just report it out. My boss said, I really want somebody that knows the operations so that when a strategy is developed, it really can be adopted by the organization, and let public affairs do all the reporting out of what we're doing.
But that sounds like a smart way to actually make it happen.
Yeah, if you really want sustainability not to be window dressing, that you really need to have an understanding of how the operations work within your company. And then we, as the sustainability leads, it's our responsibility to translate the sustainability strategy into what makes sense for that operation so that they will be more willing to adopt it.
So when you started off as a sustainability director, did you find there was a lot of lobbying, what you were trying to get through?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of convincing, because number one, as I mentioned at the beginning, Anna, there's a lot of skepticism that sustainability meant that the company would have to do things on a charitable basis as it related to environmental goodness. So part of, my convincing had to be, it doesn't have to be a charitable process, that there's actually a good business case for a lot of the strategies, and the convincing was to show them that the business case for that operation made complete sense and at the same time was good for the environment.
So how does a company who has like green champions get up to that level of sustainability when maybe they don't have, like in your case, you had, the chairman of the board who was very much an environmentalist. What do they do to get there?
Yeah, so it is an interesting challenge. I mean, having a chairman of the board is helpful, but I know individuals that have sustainability responsibility, like myself and other companies, that have support from the top of the house, but they don't have support throughout the ranks, and they have an equal challenge. So I would say even more important than having support at the top of the house is that you need to be able to go into each operation and convince them that the strategies make business sense, and when they make business sense, the operations typically are going to be behind supporting your efforts, and then you're getting that support at the ground level without even the need to have that support at the top of the house.
So when you talk about that they have to have business, economic sense, what does that exactly mean? Like where do you draw the line on return?
Yeah, so great question. So I'll give an example. So for instance, we were interested in installing renewable or solar panels at one of our assembly plants. Well, the business case by itself didn't really make a lot of sense. So the investment that we'd have to spend on the solar panels, the payback was, 40 years. So what we were able to do, knowing that that business case didn't make sense, we were actually able to partner with, in our case, the state of Michigan and a local utility company that actually provided some investment so that the investment that we put in as Ford Motor Company was so small that the payback that we actually received was like in a couple of years. So that was an example of really creating a business case that made sense.
So when you have, certain things that you want to do, and it ends up cutting into the bottom line somewhat, but not, is there a threshold, like you kind of say, like, okay, if we only lose like a certain percentage of the profits, that's okay, or if we only have a 5-year return, that's fine? I mean, how do you equate what makes sense and what doesn't make sense?
Well, again, the thresholds that we have for sustainability are no different than the thresholds that we have for any other business idea. So we don't get any, I'm going to call it slack for having less of a business case. But what we need to do is we need to get creative, because there are so many, from a governmental standpoint, from a third-party standpoint, so much interest in companies doing the right thing from a sustainability standpoint. Oftentimes we could get funding from outside of the company that when we supplement that with the funding inside the company, it actually makes for a real positive payback.
Now, when companies, like we talked about, that they have problems going, I actually hear it more when it's going down the middle to try to get that type of support. What suggestions do you have to make that buffer? Because sometimes people just don't want to change. Change is bad. So what kind of suggestions do you have with other, sustainability people and organizations to get that change to filter down?
Yeah, I think one technique that we've used is to show success in another area. So I'll give you an example. We were trying to make our assembly plants where we produce the vehicles more sustainable, to use less energy. We had some plants that were really reluctant to really take on some of those sustainability projects. But what we found were that there were a couple of facilities that were willing to take on those projects. They showed success, and once they showed success, then we went to those facilities that were reluctant at first and said, hey, these facilities, facility A and B, were able to implement that particular strategy. We were sure that you could implement the same strategy, and because they saw these other facilities implementing it, they said, hey, we're on board, we're going to implement it as well. So actually showing successes within the organization from other organizations you could use to actually convince, the current organization to actually adopt the strategies as well.
If you could name 3 things at Ford since your tenure, the 5-year tenure, that you are most proud of that got accomplished under your, reign, what would they be?
Well, actually, so I'm going to give 2 on the environmental side and 1 on the social. So 2 on the environmental side is that our long-term product strategy, so our long-term product strategy is all about what our vehicles should look like today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, is actually based upon Ford doing their share in stabilizing, the CO2, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at sustainable levels. So we're very proud of that. We're proud of the fact that we have a big focus on sustainable materials. So that means that we use a lot of recycled content in our vehicles as opposed to new virgin material being drawn from the earth. Excited about that. And then the third piece is on the social side. So social sustainability is all about human dignity, and we have in the auto industry we're the only company in the auto industry that actually has a human rights code that actually highlights, what are the right working conditions, temperatures, people getting paid a fair wage, safety in the plants. We have a human rights code that's actually the United Nations is looking at and saying other industries should be adopting a human rights code like we have.
Was that done when you were the sustainability director?
Yes, it was. Yep. So we just got it implemented over the last couple of years.
So in the future, 5 years out, what would be your wish list of things that you would love to be able to get done?
Well, I think that, we're doing a lot with our products. I would like to really have Ford be an example of using more renewable energy at our facilities. I think that's something that we can be doing. And then also, just back on the social side, there's still a lot of issues globally around human trafficking, forced labor, child labor, and I think it's large companies like Ford that could really stand up to governments and to, I would say, entities within various regions throughout the world to prevent that type of practice from happening.
And if you had, this is the last question, but if you had one thing to say to your counterparts that are struggling, what would you say to them? Because you've done some great things at Ford.
I would say, number one, know the business. Whatever company that you're in as a sustainability, I'm going to call it expert, know the business of your company. Because if you know the business of your company, you're going to have the best chance at being able to convince the organizations within that company to adopt your sustainability strategies. And then secondly, which is really related to that first recommendation, is that you need to have perseverance, because you're going to go the first time and the doors are going to be shut. You got to keep going back. So you really need to have durability and perseverance. And if you have that and you could create the business case, you will have success in your operations.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Anna.